Hey guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond the Yellow Tape. I am Nidhi and this is Julianne.
What's up, y'all?
Today we are really excited to talk to you guys about a very interesting topic, which is blood stain pattern analysis. Julianne is an expert apparently on blood stain.
I wouldn't say an expert. I know a little something. I definitely wouldn't say that.
So before we get into learning more about the blood stain patterns and like using them for crime scene reconstruction, just a basic definition of what is blood stain pattern analysis. So what a crime scene specialist does is uses blood stains dispersions, volumes or pattern and shape of the blood at a crime scene. And this all together kind of helps us to reconstruct the process of event, something that happened prior before the investigation team went to the crime scene. So using all this information, we kind of reconstruct as to basically the aftermath as to what happened at the crime scene. So like you guys can really hear and see that I'm not an expert and I don't know what I'm talking about. So before I start talking and blathering, I'll hand over the mic to Julianne, and he will explain as to what the blood stain pattern analysis actually means. Over to you, Julianne.
All right, thanks. Yeah, like Nidhi said, blood stain pattern analysis is pretty much, it can be, if there's enough at the crime scene, a big part in crime scene reconstruction because, well, I'll start with this. Blood spatter analysis is often, criticized as not being a real science sometimes because people don't feel it should be admissible in court. They feel it's up to too much interpretation because there's not many solid numbers and stats behind it. But the thing with blood spatter is that it's a fluid. Blood is a fluid. So what you're really doing is determining what this dynamic fluid, what happened to this blood while it was in the air. You're able to determine maybe not how fast it was going, but you can tell the direction it came from, the angle it came off of, the point of origin, the area of convergence, and all these things I'll get into a little bit. So if you watch a lot of crime scene shows, a lot of shows that just have bloody scenes in them, you see what the possibility can be at a crime scene. So the first most simple type of pattern would be a drip. And if you ever scraped your finger, had a what do you call these things, a paper cut when you were small, and you ran to your parents and say, you're crying and you're bleeding, you might look back and see that there's like 10 drips behind you because your hand is dripping or wherever is bleeding. And that is the most simple type of pattern right there, a drip. AKA some people might call it a drip trail if it's following you, but a drip, regular circular just pattern of blood on the ground. You see it all the time. I'm sure there's no way you haven't seen it in your life or haven't produced it in your life. One thing about blood is if you're moving, the blood will tend to follow that movement, and it helps in determining the directionality. So if I'm bleeding, leaving a drip trail, as we call it, a trail of drips, obviously. If I'm going fast enough, you'll be able to see the direction that those drops are in, and you'll be able to follow me to my location. So yeah, that's the most simple kind. You also have impact spatter is another kind. Impact spatter being when a force or an object is applied to a pool of blood. And a pool of blood could be any size. It could be it could be just a single drip, or it could be like a whole mass of blood. But if I'm walking and I step on the pool of blood, that pool of blood will erupt because my foot is dispersing that water, and the pool will just create a lot more smaller drips and a lot of other patterns around the initial pool because I stepped on it, applied the force, and spread that pool of blood out. So that's one. Yeah, that's an example of impact spatter.
Right. So even if you're beating someone up, does that also? And if there's blood. Is that also impact?
That would be also impact spatter.
Okay.
So if that, okay, that's good, because I do want to talk about something like that. Let's say as behind me, you can see me, I'm kind of in between like a corner in a sense. So if this is gonna sound kind of gruesome, but let's say this. If I'm beating somebody over the head, and obviously at some point they'll start to bleed, you would see impact spatter marks all over the wall. And again, with the directionality, you would see these marks going up the wall this way, because I am hitting this person with a force, and it's causing the blood to rush up. So you can see the direction of the blood as it goes. We call them tails. So the blood will be going in the direction of its tail. So the blood usually when it hits will be a little more round, and then it'll elongate as you go up the wall. So then you'll be able to tell that the blood is going up the wall, and you would see about an even pattern from the area of origin. So from here, you will see a good spread out, pretty even pattern going up the wall, because this is where the blood radiated from. And that also leads me to, so that's impact spatter right there.
Right.
So that also leads me to another point, because you said beating somebody.
Yes.
This is gruesome. I wish there were other like ways to describe it, but it's a bloody crime scene.
It's a bloody crime
So another pattern would be cast off. So again, I guess we'll just use my wall as examples. If you're beating somebody,
the person up, Julia.
I don't know what to describe it as. But if you're beating this person, my water bottle in this case, let's say it's a bat, will start to accumulate blood on it because this person is bleeding. So as I swing back and forth, blood will begin to fly off of the bat.
Off the bat.
And that blood as well would have a direction. And one key component to tell the difference between impact spatter and cast off is that impact spatter will radiate out from the source of the impact pretty evenly, like it will distribute itself pretty evenly, while cast off, because you're swinging an object, it will always be elongated and it will have an arc, like a semi-linear, curvilinear arc. So because I'm swinging and I'm swinging, I'm swinging down, or even if you're swinging up to something, it will always have a curve because you can't really apply a force straight ahead. That's pretty weird.
Right.
So you got to kind of come down or come up to hit something. So if I did that as I'm swinging, you would see cast off patterns about right here on the wall, and they'd be if I swung this way, they would be coming like that, facing that way. And as I swing back, the tails would point this way as I swing back, and the tails would point that way as I swing forward. So that is one way you can tell the difference between cast off patterns and impact spatter. And as you can tell by that example I just gave, crime scenes are really bloody, and you have a lot of patterns crossing each other over. So you would have there an impact spatter radiating outwards within the cast off too. So you would have to, you'd have to determine what's happening. So that's just two of the types of stains you might see. I'll give you like maybe 2 or 3 more of the really important ones. You also have voids. So
again, beating someone up.
So if I'm beating this person outside the head, you'd have your impact spatter and you'd have your cast off going back and forth. What you also would have is where this person's head is.
I'm just glad we are not doing this in person.
Oh, yeah.
Because you would be swinging the bat at me.
I'm not this, I don't have this, this much hate in my heart to beat somebody up. So let's say this is the person's head. Cool. I'm beating this person, impact spatter, cast off. What you would see if I remove this person's head from a frame would be an empty spot right there, like void of any blood. And that in itself is a pattern, letting you know that the blood flying off of wherever missed this point because something was in its way, and that is called a void in itself. So that pattern would be a void.
Right, which I'm sure is very important because that might help to place as to where the victim is and like what position the victim would be.
Right, exactly.
So then also would help be determine as to where the person would be standing when it's beating him up, and like
right,
the mat that goes behind it. Interesting.
because a lot of crime scenes, what we learned is a lot of it is determining, was this person on their knees at the time of the beating, or were they like laying down already? So those voids really, really help and stuff like that. Because then if a person's on his knees, you wouldn't see any blood where they were kneeling down at, because their feet were, their knees and their whole entire leg were blocking that area.
Right.
If the person was on laying down already and was getting beat, then it would be like kind of a whole body outline that would be a void.
Right.
So that's very important. Another important one is a spurt, and that's an arterial spurt. Like most movies you see, someone might get shot in the neck or like stabbed in the neck and then they start squirting out blood. That's not impossible, because you do have an artery, because they come from arterial spurts. Because, you know, quick biology lesson, your arteries are they push the blood out throughout the body, right? From the heart, they go to the artery, and then arteries. Am I saying that right? Arteries?
Yes.
Because arteries and veins, right?
Yeah. The largest
right.
blood lines.
Right, okay. And they're, you know, blood pressure, so they're pushing the blood out. So if you nick one of these arteries, blood will begin to shoot out. You see this in a lot of movies where someone gets hit in the neck. If someone gets hit in the neck, they spurt out blood. That may not be too possible, because your aorta, which is your largest artery, I believe, is kind of a little further back. So for someone to hit that one, and then for that blood to cleanly shoot out and not be interfered by anything, is unlikely. Where that really happens is somewhere in the stomach. You have some artery there, or around the midsection, you have an artery there that if that's cut, that would actually, it's a little closer to the surface of the skin where it'll actually spurt out. And again, what you would see in that case, if you were to, like, you know, puncture some artery, you would maybe see like more of a zigzag pattern and like an up and down, because when you think about it, the blood is being like squirted out like at high pressure. So it's like shooting out. So you would see a pattern of that, like maybe a wavy pattern for you mathematicians, something that looks like a sine function, kind of going up and down a little bit. So yeah, there's that. Again, it's a crime scene, so you might see a lot of these things overlapping. And I guess maybe the last two ones I would like to describe are swipes and wipes. Very confusing, but a swipe is when you have, let's say we have a little puddle of blood, and I wipe my hand through that. So you would be able to tell, if we, you know, I would love to have some pictures here to describe this, but you would be able to tell that there was a pool of blood there and then someone swiped it through, as opposed to a wipe, which is if my hand is bloody and I put it on a table and wipe my hand through, you would see that kind of skid mark. And the main difference between that is when blood starts to settle a little bit, the outside of the blood starts to dry up faster than the inside. So it would leave a skeleton. So if I have a pool of blood here, and let's say it sits for 5 minutes and then I wipe it away, you would see a ring where the borders of the blood were, of that blood pool were. So that would be your first clue. That's the biggest clue that was a swipe. Someone swiped away the blood that was there, intentionally or by accident. And then a wipe is if I have a bloody object and I wipe it across a clean surface, you would be able to tell that's a wipe, because there wouldn't be any skeleton marks. It would be a pretty smooth transition into just me going, you know, with my bloody object, if that makes sense.
So if you have something which is like if you have a blood on the surface, which is a pre-existing blood on the surface, and you all, then it's a swipe.
Right.
It's something like a new, not a new, but like a fresh blood body or like a fresh blood surface, and you try to like drag it or like pull it or like place it in a different place, like move it. I mean, like that would create a wiping pattern.
Right. Exactly.
So there's no pre-existing, but it's like the bloody object of the body is like moving.
Right. The swipe denotes the pre-existing one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. So that's like a couple of the types of patterns that you're likely to come across in the scene. You know. Yeah. And so that's the type of patterns you'll come across. And then there's another aspect. I feel like, to me personally, the main two aspects of blood pattern analysis is determining what you have: impact, spatter, cast off, voids, wipes, swipes, gushes, spurts, so many things. And then when you have all that information, that's when you transfer that information over onto how to get area of origin and area of convergence, which, okay, so we'll start off with area of origin, which is pretty much the area of origin. Where did this happen in 3D space? So back to my trusty board, I guess. So you're beating your person here, and let's say from the wall, this guy is 4 feet up from the ground, 2 feet to the right, and 2 feet from the west wall, and 3 feet from the south wall. Okay, you got me? So he's at this area in space. But so how do we get that? So you would see large amounts of impact spatter here. That impact spatter is how we determine area of origin. You get the angles of all the little the angles of all the impact spatter droplets, which I won't get into that today. You know, that's definitely for a deep dive episode about how to do that. So you get the angle, each droplet will have an angle denotated to it, and some are better than others. It's always better to get your angles maybe about a little further away from the original source, because right next to the source it'll be a little more messy, large amounts of blood. So you want the ones that really fly off and come up. They'll be a little more clean. Not cast off, it's still impact, but like
impact, okay.
As it would be coming off of the victim, it'll go a little further. And those are like the clean ones you want. You don't want the ones right next to the victim. You want the ones maybe a little further out, because those will be better at, those will be more cleaner than the ones next to the object, because it'll be more bloody, it'll be more messy surface over here. So you get the angle of those. And with that, you also need the area of convergence. I'll say that, which is, again, similar to the area of origin, but the area of convergence is pretty much where your where the event happened in 2D space. So if the event happened over here, for me to find the area of convergence, it would really be like on the ground. The area of convergence, I wouldn't be able to tell that this happened 4 feet up. I wouldn't be able to tell that the victim was kneeling. I just know that the victim was 3 feet from the south wall and 2 feet from the west wall.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to tell that he was 4 feet up, 4 feet from the ground. That's where you use that information, you use the angle, you use the directionality, you use all those, you put those in a little mathematical equation, which we don't have to get to today. And you use all those informations, all those details, and you get the area of convergence. So now with the area, you get the area of origin. So now when you have the area of origin, we can say this happened approximately 3 feet from the, what was it, south wall, 2 feet from the west wall, and 4 feet from the ground. And from that, you could say that this person was most likely kneeling, because your average person isn't 4 feet tall. No offense to all my small people out there. But yeah, so that would be good. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm pinpointing this area, because the area of origin could be from the size of a baseball to the size of a basketball.
Right.
It's just saying that all our points lined up in this exact area.
Okay, right.
So that would be our area of origin determination right there. And again, I'll you know, in a future episode, we'll get into exactly how you calculate these things. And hopefully I can like show you guys how it looks when, if you ever seen Dexter, you know, Dexter breaks out the string. When I was in class, we did the exact same thing. We broke out the string to get the area of origin, because you have to get the angle, above the ground. So you have to like, you know, has to really shoot off into 3D space. And then, you know, all your points will converge around this area that approximately from the size of a baseball, size of a basketball. And you can say, you know, that helps to determine if your person was standing, kneeling, sitting, you know, or whatever, stuff like that.
I have to watch the show now.
Oh, I love Dexter.
But that's very interesting that with all this information, using the pattern of the impact patterns and like using the angles, you can at least determine the origin or where the person would be standing. where the person was when it happened, which is
Right. Because you're really, these like the things that's happening with the blood and the force applied is very reproducible and predictable. So in that sense, I feel like it's wrong for like when a lot of people criticize bloodstain pattern analysis because they feel it's too much to interpretation, but that depends on, you know, who's interpreting your crime scene. I don't think anyone on earth is a blood pattern expert, just because it is a lot of variables. But the thing about blood is it will act the same under the same concept, under the same, what's the word I'm looking for? It will act the same under the same circumstances. So if you will have similar types of impact spatter, cast off stains, voids, swipes, wipes, everything. So it doesn't really make sense as to why people don't like it. I guess because even though you have what you have to interpret it, and people might interpret it differently. So maybe that's why it's a big deal. But in my mind, because the fluid dynamics are reproducible and predictable, that makes it a concrete science. So everyone doesn't, feel that way, but
that's true. Who are we to say?
Exactly. Another thing I do want to talk about is forward and back spatter. And you'll see that a lot in movies. You'll see like if I won't beat nobody this time. Of course, I'm gonna have to shoot somebody. So let's say like if you have a gun, pew pew, and you shoot someone, and the bullet goes straight through. So then behind that person, okay, let's say, so you shoot at somebody, the bullet goes straight through that person, and behind them there's a wall. Behind them would be spatter on that wall. We'd call that forward spatter because the force is forward. But also what happens if you shoot at somebody, we're all filled with blood. Yeah, some of that blood from the initial entry of that bullet was kind of come back onto the shooter, especially if they're close enough. Obviously, the further you get back, the less likely it'll be on you. But if you shoot someone point blank, you will definitely have some spatter on your shirt, some spatter on the gun, hands, everything, some back spatter. So that's also very common in shootings that are very up close and personal. So just want to get that out there too.
Oh, that's interesting. So you can shoot someone if you're far off, then you don't have those patterns. If you're close enough and the bullet passed through you, like through the victim, right? It has to.
Yeah. For them to get forward spatter, it would have to
forward
go through the victim.
Spatter, right.
Right. It would have to have like an exit wound.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. But that back spatter on the shooter would kind of probably be negligible after about 1.5 to 2 feet from what I remember. So if you're kind of, if you're not really up and close, you probably wouldn't get any, to be honest.
Wow. That's a lot of information.
No, it's a lot, and it's a lot to do. Like, it's very hands-on. Like, this is a very hands-on topic that if I could, I would like to recreate in front of you guys and show you how like these things work and how they look and how we connect the dots between all the points. But
like a crime scene reconstruction episode where we
100%
like do all of the calculations for blood spatter analysis and like use those threads and see as to how you can find the area of origin, find the angle of origin, the angle of convergence. Wow, interesting. But very honestly, like you just mentioned, that it has sure a lot of assumptions that we make as to choosing the right blood spatter, I guess, like because you have so many patterns around, like finding the best ones to calculate and all of that. But it is still science, and you're just not. It's not all up in the air, I believe. So which is
right. But that's why I feel like it is a science, but no one is an expert. There's a case that I forget that a guy went on the stand and he said he was an expert, and pretty much throughout the process, throughout the trial, he said he was an expert. And this suspect went to jail even though he didn't do it, and he did a good bit of time. I believe it could have been 20-30 years. And like due to the Innocence Project, if you guys ever heard of them, they got him released because this guy, I think he took a 40-hour certificate course, which so did I. So, and I would never say that I'm an expert, but he did, resulting in someone's freedom being taken away. So I would never say that I'm an expert, but at the same time, these are like facts that are happening on the wall. Like if you see impact spatter, there was an event where something in a sense exploded from that point. Cast off, same thing, void. So it's like,
Yeah.
maybe you want to have multiple people look at it so you can get more than one viewpoint or more than one point of view. But I alone, and I don't think any one person should call themselves an expert. I think that's definitely the wrong thing to do.
And also, like if you have a crime scene where you could use multiple elements from the crime scene, but that I mean like use blood spatter or like use DNA or fingerprints or like footprints, it's basically adding the weight to the case. So ultimately, when you see
exactly
collaborative evidence for something that took place or just happened, so it's nothing bad in adding more layers of evidence, but of course you don't want to add false information. You would want to add something which is based on stats or which is based on real science, and which you can explain to the jury in a way that this is just not like a hypothetical situation. It is through all these calculations, all this data that we have collected in the field, we are producing in front of you.
Right.
So I'm sure.
Because the thing with crime scene reconstruction, it's like a huge umbrella. There's so many parts to it that, like, Bloodstain is a small part. And if you have a whole crime scene you're working at, there might be some glass, that's a part of crime scene. There might be some fingerprints, there might be some broken objects, and then you have blood. So all of these are under the umbrella of crime scene reconstruction. So like you said, it's just a small part in weighing down and adding weight to all the evidence you've collected so far.
Right, exactly. And yes, it was really interesting to know, because I learned a lot. I am definitely not much into blood stain spatter or pattern analysis. So thank you, Julie.
Fair enough.
And I'm sure the audience would also be really excited in learning about blood stain pattern analysis. So yes, before we wrap it up, thank you once again, Julian, for sharing with us all this interesting information. So once again, before we wrap it up, we have really interesting episodes coming up where you see now, guys, we're building up and kind of explaining different fields in forensic. So then we will also get into different real life cases where we could combine all these different topics that you've talked about in real life. So for that, please stay tuned. Again, any questions, concerns, suggestions, just leave a comment below and we will get back to it. Yes.
I like that.
Leave a comment below. So before we sign off, do not forget to like, Julia,
share,
and subscribe. Thank you once again.
All right, guys. Peace out.
See you guys next week. Bye.